The morning sun cast long shadows across Terra University's main campus as Dr. Michael Harrison checked his watch for the fifth time. Today marked the beginning of something that had never happened before in human history. 23 alien. Students from 12 different worlds would arrive to study human behavior and culture as part of the first Galactic Education Consortium exchange program. Dr. Harrison adjusted his tie and looked at his assistant, Dr. Lisa Morgan, who was reviewing her tablet with nervous energy. "Are you ready for this, Lisa?" he asked. "As ready as anyone can be for hosting beings from other planets," she replied with a small smile. "The transport should arrive any minute. Ahmedabad." University had spent months preparing for this day. Special dormitories were built with adjustable atmospheric controls. The cafeteria added new food synthesizers. Even the library installed universal translation devices. But no amount of preparation could ease the tension both humans felt as they waited for first contact on this scale. A low humming sound filled the air above them. Students and faculty across the campus stopped what they were doing and looked up. A sleek silver vessel descended slowly, its surface reflecting the morning light like liquid metal. The ship landed softly on the designated area of the main quad, with barely a whisper of sound. A door appeared in the seamless hull and opened with a soft hiss. The first being to emerge stood nearly 8 feet tall with pale blue skin and large dark eyes that seemed to take in everything at once. This was Velox, representing the Xanthari species known throughout the galaxy for their logical approach to all aspects of life. Behind Velox came a shorter figure with 4 arms and skin that shifted colors like an oil spill. Quill belonged to the Nexari, a species that operated as a collective mind but had learned to function as individuals for this exchange program. The third alien to step onto Earth soil made several humans take a step backward. Thresh was clearly from a predator species. Standing 7 feet tall with sharp features and movements that suggested barely contained power, the Corvin looked like evolution had designed the perfect hunter. More aliens followed, each more unusual than the last. There were beings with crystalline skin, others that seemed to float rather than walk, and some that appeared to be made of living shadow. Dr. Harrison counted them carefully, making sure all 23 had arrived safely. "Welcome to Earth," Dr. Harrison said, his voice carrying across the quad through the translation devices. "I am Dr. Michael Harrison, and this is Dr. Lisa Morgan. We will be your guides during your stay here." Velox stepped forward, speaking, in a voice that sounded like wind chimes. "We are grateful for this opportunity to observe your species. The Xanthari have many questions about human behavior patterns." Quill's voice came next, though it seemed to come from several directions at once. "The Nexari Collective is curious about individual human decision-making processes." Thresh simply nodded, yellow eyes scanning the gathered crowd of human students and faculty who had come to witness the historic moment. Dr. Morgan began leading the group toward the main administration building. As they walked, she explained the basic layout of the campus and the schedule they would follow. The aliens listened carefully, though many seemed distracted by the human behavior they observed around them. Near the student center, a group of human children was playing while their parents attended a campus event. When a small boy stumbled and scraped his knee, something remarkable happened from the alien's perspective. Every nearby human adult immediately moved toward the child, even those who had no apparent connection to him. Velox tilted his head, watching, as strangers offered tissues, words of comfort, and assistance. "This behavior pattern is inefficient," he observed to Quill. "Why do unrelated adults expend energy on offspring that do not share their genetic material?" Quill's skin flickered through several colors as he processed this observation. Among the Nexari, only designated caregivers tend to young ones. These humans seem to operate without clear role assignments. Dr. Harrison overheard their conversation. That's actually one of the things that makes humans unique, he explained. We have a strong protective instinct toward all children, not just our own. The aliens exchanged what could only be described as confused looks. As they continued the tour, more unusual human behaviors caught the aliens' attention. They noticed warning signs everywhere about child safety. Playgrounds had soft surfaces beneath climbing equipment. Swimming pools had multiple lifeguards and safety barriers. Even simple stairs had handrails at child height in addition to adult height. Your species devotes significant resources to protecting your weakest members, Thresh observed, though his tone suggested this was not necessarily a compliment. Dr. Morgan smiled. Children are our future. Protecting them is one of our highest priorities. Inside the main building, they passed a bulletin board covered with notices about child safety programs, youth activities, and volunteer opportunities to help young people. The aliens studied these announcements with the intensity of scientists examining a new species. There are requests here for humans to donate their time to teach skills to unrelated offspring, Quill noted, his voice carrying puzzlement. What benefit do these adults receive in return? The satisfaction of helping others, Dr. Harrison replied. Many humans find great meaning in contributing to the welfare of children. The tour continued through the library, where they observed a reading program where university students read stories to local children. The aliens watched in fascination as young human adults patiently helped small children sound out difficult words and answered endless questions about the pictures in books. By the time they reached the dormitories where the alien students would stay, Velox had filled several pages of notes with observations about human behavior that defied Xanthari logic. Quill had recorded dozens of instances where individual humans acted in ways that seemed contrary to personal benefit. Thresh had identified what he considered to be fundamental weaknesses in human survival strategy. Tomorrow, we begin formal observations, Dr. Morgan announced as she showed them to their rooms. Each of you will be paired with a human family to observe daily life patterns. As the aliens settled into their new temporary homes, they discussed among themselves the strange behaviors they had already witnessed. None of them could understand why a species that had achieved space travel and built a thriving civilization seemed so focused on protecting individuals who contributed nothing to society's immediate needs. What they would learn in the coming days would challenge everything they thought they knew about survival, strength, and the true measure of an advanced civilization. The second day of the exchange program began early as Dr. Morgan paired each alien student with a human family. The aliens would spend the next week observing daily life, documenting behaviors, and trying to understand human society from the inside. Velox found himself assigned to the Johnson family in Seattle. Tom Johnson worked as an engineer while his wife Rachel taught at a local elementary school. They had 2 children, 8-year-old Jake and 5-year-old Molly. From the moment Velox entered their home, he began recording observations that challenged everything the Xanthari understood about logical resource allocation. The house itself puzzled Velox. Child safety devices covered every corner and outlet. Gates blocked stairs. Locks secured cabinets containing anything remotely dangerous. This level of environmental modification for juvenile protection seems excessive, Velox noted in his daily report. At breakfast, he watched Tom and Rachel prepare separate meals for each family member. Jake received extra protein because he played soccer. Molly got cut fruit arranged in fun shapes because she was a picky eater. The adults ate simple toast and coffee. Why do you consume lower-quality nutrition while providing superior food to your offspring? Velox asked. Tom looked confused by the question. Kids need good nutrition to grow properly. Rachel and I can eat anything. This made no sense to Velox. Among the Xanthari, the strongest adults received the best resources to maintain their ability to provide for the group. Weak juveniles received basic nutrition sufficient for survival. The morning routine continued with behaviors Velox found increasingly baffling. Rachel spent 20 minutes helping Molly find a lost toy before school. Tom drove Jake to soccer practice even though it meant leaving work early and losing income. Both parents checked and double-checked that their children had everything they needed. Your efficiency ratings are extremely poor, Velox observed. You spend significant time and energy on tasks that could be simplified or eliminated, Rachel laughed. Being a parent isn't about efficiency, it's about making sure our kids feel loved and secure. Meanwhile, across the country in Miami, Quill was having his own confusing experiences. He had been assigned to observe various community interactions rather than a single family. His first stop was a public playground where parents brought their children to play. Quill watched from a bench, his skin shifting through confused purple and green patterns as he tried to understand what he was seeing. Parents who had never met before talked easily about their children. When one toddler fell and started crying, 3 different adults rushed over to help, even though the child belonged to none of them. The incident that truly baffled Quill involved 6-year-old Emma, who was playing alone while her mother talked with friends nearby. Emma climbed too high on the monkey bars and lost her grip, falling hard onto the rubber surface below. She began crying loudly, holding her scraped elbow. What happened next defied everything Quill knew about individual behavior versus collective needs. Every adult in the playground area immediately stopped their conversations and moved toward the injured child. A man Quill later learned was named Robert left his own children to check on Emma. A woman named Jennifer abandoned her phone call to offer tissues and bandages from her purse. Another parent named David actually picked up Emma to comfort her while they waited for her mother to arrive. These humans are responding to distress signals from unrelated juveniles, Quill reported, to his recording device. This behavior serves no apparent purpose for the individuals involved and actually puts them at risk of injury or blame. The child's mother, Patricia, finally reached them and thanked everyone profusely. But instead of accepting her gratitude and leaving, several adults stayed to make sure Emma was truly okay. They offered suggestions for treating the scrape and even gave Emma small gifts to make her feel better. Quill's Nexari training told him this was impossible. Individual creatures did not risk themselves for the offspring of others unless commanded by the collective. Yet here were dozens of humans doing exactly that with no central authority directing their actions. In Denver, Thresh was observing what humans called a school zone. He positioned himself near an intersection where a crossing guard named Robert Williams worked every morning and afternoon. Thresh's predator instincts immediately identified this as an extremely dangerous location. Fast-moving metal vehicles, weighing thousands of pounds, traveled through the area at regular intervals. What made no sense to Thresh was Robert's behavior. Twice each day, this elderly human deliberately placed himself between these dangerous vehicles and small human children. Robert carried only a small stop sign and wore a bright vest, neither of which would protect him if a vehicle struck him. The human Robert Williams exhibits suicidal behavior patterns, Thresh recorded. He repeatedly exposes himself to mortal danger to allow juvenile humans safe passage across a vehicular pathway. Thresh decided to speak directly with Robert during a quiet moment. "Your survival instincts appear to be malfunctioning," he said through his translation device. "Why do you place yourself in danger for offspring that are not genetically related to you?" Robert chuckled and adjusted his bright yellow vest. "These are our community's kids. Someone needs to keep them safe getting to and from school. But you receive no compensation for this risk," Thresh pointed out. "The logical action would be to avoid this dangerous location entirely." "I've got grandchildren of my own," Robert explained. "I'd want someone looking out for them, too. Besides, these kids didn't choose to live near a busy road. Adults created this dangerous situation, so adults should fix it." Thresh filed this under incomprehensible human logic and continued his observations. As the day progressed, Thresh witnessed Robert help countless children cross safely. When a small girl named Amy dropped her backpack in the street, Robert immediately stopped traffic and retrieved it himself, rather than asking the child to enter the dangerous roadway. When two boys were running late for school, Robert held up a line of impatient drivers so the children could cross without rushing into danger. By evening, all three alien observers were struggling to process what they had witnessed. Their preliminary reports to Dr. Harrison and Dr. Morgan were filled with questions and contradictions. Human behavior patterns defy logical survival strategies, Velox reported during their daily briefing. Adults consistently prioritize juvenile welfare over their own immediate needs. Individual humans respond to child distress signals as if operating under collective programming, yet no such programming appears to exist, Quill added. Thresh simply shook his head. Your species exhibits protective behaviors that would be considered maladaptive by any reasonable evolutionary standard. Dr. Harrison smiled at their confusion. What you're observing is something we call parental instinct and community care. It extends beyond our own biological children to include all young people in our society. The aliens exchanged glances that clearly communicated their shared bewilderment. Tomorrow would bring new observations and even deeper mysteries about human behavior that seemed to prioritize the weak over the strong, the young over the experienced, and the needs of others over personal survival. The morning started like any other day of the exchange program. Dr. Morgan had arranged for the alien students to accompany a group of human children on a field trip to the Pacific Science Museum in downtown Seattle. She thought it would be an excellent opportunity for the aliens to observe how humans educated their young while interacting with them in a structured environment. 23 alien students joined 30 human children ranging in age from 6 to 12, along with 6 adult supervisors, including teacher Amanda Clark and museum security guard David Foster. The aliens had been looking forward to studying human learning patterns in a controlled environment. Velox walked alongside 9-year-old Tommy Williams, who peppered him with endless questions about life on other planets. Quill found himself surrounded by a group of curious children who were fascinated by his color-changing skin. Even Thresh, despite his intimidating appearance, had attracted followers among the older children who thought he looked totally awesome. The museum visit began normally. Children moved from exhibit to exhibit, their adult supervisors maintaining careful watch while encouraging exploration and learning. The aliens documented how human adults constantly counted children, checked for safety hazards, and positioned themselves between the young ones and any potential danger. Human adults exhibit hypervigilant behavior patterns regarding juvenile safety, Velox noted quietly into his recording device. They scan continuously for threats that may not exist. Inside the earthquake simulation exhibit, the children were learning about seismic activity and building safety. The irony was not lost on anyone when, at exactly 11:47 a.m., the building began to shake with real earthquake tremors. At first, everyone thought it was part of the exhibit, but as the shaking intensified and emergency alarms began sounding throughout the building, the terrible reality became clear. This was a major earthquake, and they were trapped inside a large building that was beginning to suffer structural damage. What happened next would forever change how the alien students understood human behavior. The moment the adults realized this was a real emergency, every single human adult in the group immediately moved to shield the nearest children. Teacher Amanda Clark threw herself over 3 students as ceiling tiles began falling. Museum guard David Foster used his body as a human shield to protect a group of 6-year-olds from falling glass from a broken display case. All adults move to protect juveniles regardless of genetic relationship, Quill observed with amazement, even as he watched more ceiling debris crash around them. The building groaned and partially collapsed, trapping their entire group in what had been the earthquake exhibit room. Dust filled the air, making it hard to see or breathe. Several adults were injured by falling debris, but their first concern was not their own wounds. "Is everyone okay? Count off, kids," Amanda Clark called out, blood running from a cut on her forehead. She moved through the group, checking each child for injuries while ignoring her own obvious pain. When 8-year-old Lisa Martinez began crying from fear, volunteer parent chaperone Kevin Brooks crawled over to her despite his obviously broken arm. He sat beside her and began telling funny stories to keep her calm, using his good arm to pat her shoulder reassuringly. The injured adult, Kevin Brooks, continues to provide comfort to an unrelated juvenile while requiring medical attention himself, Thresh recorded, his voice filled with confusion. This behavior contradicts all logical survival protocols. David Foster, despite having a large gash on his leg from falling metal, organized the children into the safest corner of the room and began teaching them breathing exercises to stay calm. When some of the younger children started panicking, he began singing simple songs that they knew, encouraging them to sing along. The aliens watched in amazement as every injured adult prioritized the children's emotional and physical well-being over their own immediate needs. Parent volunteer Maria Santos, who had blood streaming from her scalp, used her torn shirt to bandage a small cut on 10-year-old Jake's hand before addressing her own more serious injury. "We need to find a way out," Amanda announced to the other adults. The room had only one exit, partially blocked by fallen concrete and twisted metal. It would be dangerous to attempt clearing it, but staying put was not an option as they could hear gas hissing from broken pipes. What the aliens witnessed next defied every principle of logical behavior they had ever learned. Without any discussion or argument, every able-bodied adult began working to clear the exit, taking turns to shield the children from flying debris as they worked. When the passage became partially clear but remained dangerous, the adults faced a terrible choice. Someone would have to go through first to test if it was safe. Every single adult immediately volunteered to be the first one through the dangerous passage. "I'll go," said Amanda. "No, I should go," insisted David. "I'm the strongest. Let me do it," argued Kevin, despite his broken arm. The aliens recorded this moment with stunned silence. Among their species, the strongest or most valuable individuals would be sent through last after expendable members tested the route for safety. Amanda Clark finally settled the argument. "I'm going through first. If I make it safely, we'll send the children through next. Smallest ones first. Adults go last." She squeezed through the dangerous gap, testing each step carefully. When she called back that the route was passable, the evacuation began with the youngest children going first. Volunteer parent Robert Anderson, despite having twisted his ankle badly, lifted each small child up to the gap and helped them through, to safety. David Foster, bleeding heavily from his leg wound, followed each child partway through the passage to ensure they made it safely to the other side. One by one, every child was evacuated to safety. Only then did the adults begin evacuating themselves, with the most severely injured going first only because the others insisted. When 9-year-old Emma suddenly remembered that her friend's backpack with asthma medicine was still in the collapsed room, Kevin Brooks immediately turned around to go back for it, despite his broken arm and the continuing aftershocks. The injured adult, Kevin Brooks, is returning to a dangerous area to retrieve medical supplies for a juvenile, Thresh recorded, his voice filled with something that might have been awe. As they waited for rescue teams outside the damaged building, the aliens observed the aftermath. Every adult was checking and rechecking that all children were accounted for and uninjured. Those with medical training were treating the children first, even when their own injuries were more severe. Parent volunteer Jennifer Hayes, who had dislocated her shoulder during the collapse, was using her good arm to distribute snacks to frightened children while refusing pain medication until all the kids had been checked by paramedics. When the rescue teams finally arrived, the alien students watched human emergency responders exhibit the same inexplicable behavior patterns. Every first responder immediately prioritized treating the children, even though several adults had more serious injuries. Human emergency protocols prioritize juvenile welfare over logical medical triage, Velox observed to his colleagues as they watched paramedics work. By the end of the day, all the children were safely reunited with their families, while several adults were hospitalized for their injuries. Not a single adult had complained about their treatment or requested priority care over the children. As they returned to the university that evening, the alien students were unusually quiet. They had witnessed something that challenged everything. They thought they understood about survival, logic, and the behavior of intelligent species. The crisis had revealed something profound about human nature that mere observation could never have shown them. 3 days after the earthquake crisis, the alien students gathered in Dr. Harrison's conference room at Terra University. The atmosphere was different now. Gone was their initial confidence in understanding human behavior through simple observation. The crisis had shaken their fundamental beliefs about how intelligent species should behave. Dr. Harrison looked around the table at 23 confused faces from 12 different worlds. I know what you witnessed at the museum was difficult to process. Would you like to discuss what you observed? Velox was the first to speak, his usually calm voice carrying notes of frustration. Human adults exhibited behavior patterns that directly contradict survival logic. They place themselves in mortal danger to protect juveniles who contribute nothing to immediate group survival. The injured human Kevin Brooks returned to a collapse zone for medical supplies for an unrelated juvenile, Thresh added, his predator instincts still unable to comprehend such seemingly wasteful behavior. This action served no logical purpose for his own survival or genetic legacy. Dr. Lisa Morgan leaned forward in her chair. What if I told you that behavior actually serves a very important survival purpose, just not in the way you might expect? The aliens exchanged glances. Several of them shifted in their seats, waiting for an explanation that might finally make sense of what they had witnessed. Let me show you something else, Dr. Morgan said, standing up. We're going to visit Seattle Children's Hospital. I want you to observe another aspect of human behavior toward children. An hour later, the group stood outside the pediatric ward of one of the region's largest hospitals. Dr. Morgan had arranged for them to observe the daily operations, with permission from families and staff. Inside the bright, colorfully decorated ward, the aliens immediately noticed something unusual. There were far more human adults present than seemed necessary for basic medical care. Nurse Jennifer Adams was working her third consecutive 12-hour shift, even though she had completed her required hours 2 days earlier. When asked why she stayed, she simply said, "These kids need someone who knows their routines. I can't leave them with strangers." The aliens watched her carefully adjust pillows for 7-year-old Michael, who was recovering from surgery. She had memorized his favorite songs and sang to him when he couldn't sleep. She knew that 10-year-old Sarah was afraid of needles and always brought special stickers to distract her during procedures. The adult, Jennifer Adams, has extensive detailed knowledge about juvenile patients who share no genetic connection to her, Quill observed. She expends additional energy to provide comfort beyond basic medical requirements. In another room, they met Mark Thompson, a retired teacher who volunteered at the hospital 3 days a week. He spent hours reading stories to young patients, helping them with schoolwork they missed, and playing simple games to keep their spirits up. I don't have grandchildren of my own, Mark explained to the curious aliens, but these kids need someone to remind them that the world outside is still full of good things waiting for them. Thresh studied Mark carefully. You receive no compensation for this energy expenditure. Your own survival needs are not enhanced by these activities. Mark smiled. You're right. I don't get paid. But seeing a sick child smile when I walk into their room is worth more than money. The concept of actions having value beyond physical compensation was foreign to most of the alien species represented in the group. They moved through the ward, observing more examples of seemingly illogical human behavior. Volunteer coordinator. Nancy Davis had organized a complex schedule ensuring that no child spent extended time alone. Art therapist Susan Miller brought supplies from her own home when the hospital budget couldn't cover special projects for patients. In the playroom, child life specialist Patricia Johnson worked with 8-year-old Danny, who was afraid of his upcoming surgery. She used dolls and toy medical equipment to help him understand what would happen, spending nearly an hour ensuring he felt prepared and less frightened. The adult Patricia Johnson expends significant time resources to reduce psychological distress in a juvenile scheduled for necessary medical procedures, Velox recorded. The logical approach would be to proceed with required medical intervention regardless of juvenile emotional state. Dr. Morgan overheard his observation. Actually, research shows that children who are less frightened heal faster and have better outcomes. Patricia's work directly improves medical results. This gave Velox pause. Perhaps some human behaviors that seemed illogical actually served purposes his species had not considered. Their next stop was the hospital's family support area, where parents of young patients could rest and eat. The aliens observed that many families had been here for weeks or months, sleeping in uncomfortable chairs and eating cafeteria food, all to remain close to their hospitalized children. James and Carol Peterson had been living at the hospital for 6 weeks while their daughter Emma underwent cancer treatment. James had lost his job because he refused to leave Emma's side. Carol had developed back problems from sleeping in a chair every night. Yet when asked if they regretted their choices, both parents looked at the aliens as if the question made no sense. "Emma needs us here," Carol said simply. "She's only 5 years old. We're her whole world right now." The aliens struggled to understand why these adults would sacrifice their own health, comfort, and economic stability for a juvenile who might not survive regardless of their presence. Later that day, Dr. Harrison took them to observe a different aspect of human child protection behavior. They visited Roosevelt Elementary School, where they met crossing guard Robert Williams, whom Thresh had observed earlier in the program. But today, they also met Principal Helen Martinez, who had spent her own money to install additional safety equipment around the school. They observed teacher Michael Johnson, who stayed late every day to tutor struggling students without additional pay. They watched custodian David Brown, who had learned sign language so he could communicate with a deaf student named Tommy. Each adult has modified their behavior to accommodate juvenile needs, Quill noted. They provide services beyond their assigned responsibilities. The final stop was the most puzzling for the aliens. Dr. Morgan brought them to a community center where volunteers ran after-school programs for local children. These adults had no official connection to the children they served. They received no payment. Many had full-time jobs elsewhere, but chose to spend their free time supervising activities, helping with homework, and providing snacks for hungry. Kids Program Coordinator Lisa Chen had been running the center for 15 years. When budget cuts threatened to close the program, she organized fundraising events and personally covered expenses to keep it open. "These juveniles are not genetically related to you," Thresh pointed out to Lisa. "Your species' survival is not enhanced by their continued welfare." Lisa looked thoughtful for a moment. "You know, you're right that they're not my biological children, but they're our community's children. Their success is our success. Their safety is our responsibility. When children thrive, everyone benefits." As they returned to the university that evening, the alien students were quiet. They had witnessed layers of human behavior that seemed to defy every principle of logical resource allocation and survival strategy they had ever learned. Yet something nagged at them. These humans had built a thriving civilization, achieved space travel, and created technologies that impressed even advanced alien species. If their approach to child rearing was truly inefficient, how had they become so successful? That night, each alien student spent hours reviewing their notes and recordings, trying to find the logic hidden within seemingly illogical human behavior. The answer was there, waiting to be discovered, but it would require them to completely rethink their understanding of what it meant to be a successful species. 1 week after their hospital visit, the alien students were conducting their final urban observation exercise in downtown Seattle. Dr. Morgan had arranged for them to study human behavior in high-density population areas, focusing on how strangers interacted with each other and particularly how they responded to children in public spaces. The aliens had spread out across several city blocks, each documenting different aspects of urban human behavior. Velox was observing a busy shopping district, noting how humans created protective spaces around small children in crowded areas. Quill had positioned himself near a school bus stop, fascinated by how adult strangers automatically supervised children waiting for transportation. Thresh was studying pedestrian traffic patterns, particularly how human adults modified their walking routes to avoid frightening or intimidating young people. It was 2:30 in the afternoon when smoke began, pouring from the windows of the Riverside apartment complex, a 6-story building that housed over 200 families. The aliens initially thought this might be another normal human activity they didn't understand, until they heard the piercing sound of emergency sirens and saw people running from the building. This was a real fire, and it was spreading fast. From their various observation points, the alien students had an unprecedented view of human emergency response behavior. What they witnessed over the next 4 hours would become the most significant data they collected during their entire stay on Earth. Fire trucks arrived within minutes, their crews immediately beginning evacuation and firefighting procedures. Captain James Sullivan jumped from the first truck and began coordinating his team's response. The aliens watched him scan the building and make rapid decisions about rescue priorities. "Priority 1, children and elderly residents on upper floors," Captain Sullivan shouted to his team. "Teams of 2, start with the family units." Thresh recorded this with confusion. Human emergency protocols prioritize the weakest and most vulnerable members first. This contradicts optimal survival strategy, which would save the strongest first. Firefighter Maria Rodriguez grabbed her equipment and headed for the main stairwell, which was already filling with smoke. The aliens watched her climb past injured adults on lower floors, checking quickly that they could evacuate on their own before continuing upward to reach trapped families with small children. On the 3rd floor, she found the Miller family. Parents: Tom and Janet with their 3 children ages 4, 7, and 9. The stairwell had become too dangerous for the children to navigate alone, filled with thick smoke and debris from the fire above. Without hesitation, Maria Rodriguez made 3 separate trips up the dangerous stairwell, carrying each child down, individually to safety. By her 3rd trip, the stairs were nearly impassable, but she refused to leave 9-year-old Alex Miller behind. The human Maria Rodriguez repeatedly enters an increasingly dangerous environment to evacuate juveniles, Quill observed, his skin cycling through colors that indicated deep confusion. Each return trip reduces her own survival probability significantly. Meanwhile, Captain Sullivan had discovered that several families were trapped on the 5th floor, cut off by flames in the main stairwell. The fire department's ladder truck positioned itself outside the building, preparing for high-altitude rescues. The first family reached was the Johnson household. Single mother Amy Johnson with her 6-month-old baby and 3-year-old daughter. Captain Sullivan himself climbed the ladder to reach them, fighting smoke and heat that made breathing nearly impossible. When he reached the window, he faced a critical decision. The ladder could only support limited weight, and with smoke pouring. From the building, he had very little time. The logical choice would be to take the adult first, as she was most likely to survive and could potentially help with future rescues. Instead, Captain Sullivan took baby Sarah Johnson first, then made a second trip for 3-year-old Emma, and only on his 3rd dangerous climb did he rescue Amy Johnson herself. The rescue leader, Captain Sullivan, prioritizes the smallest and most helpless. Humans first, Velox recorded, his analytical mind struggling to find logic in this decision. These juveniles have the lowest probability of contributing to immediate survival efforts. Across the street, other human emergency responders exhibited equally puzzling behavior. Police officer David Martinez coordinated ground-level evacuation, ensuring that all children were immediately moved to safe areas and provided with comfort items like blankets and water. When 8-year-old Michael Chen became separated from his parents in the chaos, Officer Martinez abandoned his other duties to personally search the crowd until he found them. Emergency medical technician Paul Anderson set up a triage area and began treating evacuees. When presented with multiple patients, including adults with serious smoke inhalation and children with minor scrapes and fear-related distress, he treated the children first. The medical human Paul Anderson provides treatment based on age rather than injury severity, Thresh noted with amazement. This approach seems medically inefficient. But the moment that truly astounded all the alien observers came when maintenance worker Greg Mitchell arrived at the scene. Greg had no official emergency training, no special equipment, and no legal obligation to help. He had simply been walking past when he saw the fire. As professional rescue teams worked on the upper floors, Greg heard a small voice crying from a ground-floor window that rescuers had overlooked in their focus on more dramatic upper-floor rescues. Inside was 4-year-old Tyler Washington, who had been hiding under his bed when his family evacuated, too frightened to come out. Greg Mitchell approached the window and saw Tyler inside, crying and calling for his mother. The window was too small for professional rescue equipment, but Greg could fit through it. The problem was that the room was filling with smoke, and no one knew how quickly the fire might spread to that area. Without calling for backup or waiting for professional help, Greg Mitchell climbed through the window into the burning building. Enil, untrained human Greg Mitchell has entered a dangerous structure to retrieve an unrelated juvenile. All 3 primary alien observers recorded simultaneously. This action violates every logical survival protocol and serves no purpose for his genetic continuation. Greg found Tyler under the bed, lifted the terrified child, and carried him back to the window. But the opening was too small for both of them to fit through together safely. Greg had to push Tyler through first, then squeeze through himself, suffering burns on his arms and legs as he did so. When Greg emerged from the building carrying Tyler, the crowd of humans gathered outside erupted in cheers. Tyler's parents, who had been frantically searching for their son, rushed forward crying with relief. "Thank you," Tyler's father said, tears streaming down his face. "Thank you for saving my boy." Greg, despite his injuries, simply nodded and said, "Couldn't leave him in there alone." Emergency medical teams immediately treated Greg's burns, but he refused pain medication until he was certain Tyler had been thoroughly checked by doctors. Only when the child was confirmed to be physically unharmed did Greg allow himself to be fully treated. As the fire was finally brought under control hours later, the alien students reviewed their recordings and observations. Every single human involved in the emergency response had consistently prioritized the safety and welfare of children over all other considerations, including their own survival. Captain Sullivan had made 7 dangerous trips into the burning building, each time prioritizing the youngest and most vulnerable residents. Firefighter Rodriguez had suffered smoke inhalation because she insisted on carrying out every child personally rather than allowing them to navigate dangerous areas alone. Police officer Martinez had maintained detailed tracking of every child's location and family reunification status throughout the entire crisis. Most remarkably to the aliens, civilian humans had exhibited the same behavior patterns. Volunteer coordinator Susan Miller had appeared with van loads of supplies specifically for the displaced families, focusing on providing comfort items for frightened children. Restaurant owner Michael Torres had arrived with free food, making sure every child ate before serving adults. Hotel manager Jennifer Hayes had donated rooms specifically for families with young children, asking for nothing in return. Humans who have no official emergency response training exhibit the same juvenile protection behaviors as trained professionals, Quill observed as they returned to the university that evening. This suggests the behavior is not learned, but instinctual. Thresh was unusually quiet as he processed what he had witnessed. The human Greg Mitchell sustained injury to rescue a juvenile that shared no genetic material with him. He received no compensation. His action increased the survival chances of one small human while decreasing his own safety significantly. Velox's normally logical analysis was struggling with the day's observations. These behaviors cannot be explained through any rational survival model known to Xanthari science, yet humans continue to thrive as a species while consistently exhibiting these apparently maladaptive behaviors. That night, as the alien students prepared their reports, they were forced to confront a troubling possibility. Maybe human behavior wasn't actually illogical. Maybe their own species had missed something fundamental about what it truly meant to be successful as a civilization. The question that kept them awake was simple. If protecting the weakest members actually made a species stronger, what did that say about their own supposedly superior survival strategies? The final week of the exchange program arrived with an atmosphere of quiet contemplation. The alien students had filled countless data storage devices with observations, recordings, and analysis of human behavior. But as they prepared their final reports, each species was grappling with conclusions that challenged their fundamental understanding of survival, success, and civilization itself. Dr. Harrison and Dr. Morgan had arranged for a final presentation session where each alien student would share their findings with the group before returning to their home worlds. The conference room felt different now, charged with the weight of discoveries that would reshape how 12 different species viewed not just humans, but themselves. Velox was the first to present his findings. The logical Xanthari, who had arrived, confident that human behavior would be easily explained through rational analysis, now stood before his colleagues with data that defied every model his species had developed. Initial hypothesis. Human child protection behaviors represent inefficient resource allocation, Velox began, his voice carrying none of its earlier certainty. After extended observation and crisis documentation, this hypothesis must be rejected. He activated a holographic display showing his collected data. Human adults who prioritize juvenile welfare demonstrate consistent patterns of innovation, cooperation, and problem-solving that exceed baseline survival requirements. The Johnson family, observed over multiple weeks, exhibits planning behaviors that extend decades into the future. Their resource allocation for offspring education and development generates returns that benefit not just their genetic line, but their entire community. Velox paused, struggling with concepts that challenged Xanthari doctrine. Most significantly, humans who protect unrelated juveniles create social bonds that enhance group survival probability beyond what pure genetic selection could achieve. The crossing guard Robert Williams has created a protective network around his community's children that involves dozens of adults, each contributing to overall safety and welfare. He looked around the room at his fellow alien students. Conclusion. What appears to be inefficient behavior is actually the most advanced survival strategy observed in galactic civilization. By ensuring the protection and development of all juveniles, humans maximize their species' adaptability and innovation potential. Quill's presentation followed, his skin cycling through thoughtful silver and gold patterns as he shared his findings about human collective behavior without central coordination. The Nexari collective operates through shared consciousness and directed cooperation, Quill explained. We hypothesized that human juvenile protection required similar central programming. Observation data contradicts this assumption entirely. His display showed recordings from the playground, the hospital, and the fire emergency. Humans exhibit coordinated juvenile protection behaviors without any central authority directing their actions. When 6-year-old Emma fell at the playground, 17 adults responded immediately without communication or planning. During the apartment fire, civilian humans Greg Mitchell and others took independent action that perfectly complemented professional emergency responders. Quill's voice carried wonder as he continued. This represents a form of collective intelligence superior to Nexari hive mind coordination. Humans achieve perfect cooperation through shared values rather than shared consciousness. Each individual chooses to prioritize juvenile welfare, creating emergent group behaviors that surpass planned coordination. He turned to face Dr. Harrison and Dr. Morgan directly. Your species has achieved something the Nexari believed impossible: collective action through individual choice. Every human adult becomes a voluntary guardian of all juveniles, creating a protection network that covers your entire civilization. Thresh's presentation was the most dramatic transformation. The predator species representative had arrived believing that humans were fundamentally weak for protecting their vulnerable members. His final analysis painted a completely different picture. Corvin doctrine teaches that strength comes from eliminating weakness, Thresh began, his voice carrying an unusual tone that his colleagues had never heard before. We believed humans were soft because they protected instead of culling their weak juveniles. Extended observation reveals this assumption to be catastrophically incorrect. His display showed data from every crisis he had observed, from the earthquake to the fire. Humans are not weak because they protect juveniles. Humans are the apex predator species precisely because they never abandon their future generation. Every human adult is a potential warrior in defense of children, regardless of genetic relationship. Thresh's yellow eyes gleamed as he continued. During the apartment fire, maintenance worker Greg Mitchell demonstrated predatory instincts superior to trained Corvin hunters. He assessed danger, made tactical decisions, and executed a successful rescue mission while accepting personal injury. Risk. His motivation was not territorial or genetic, but the protection of a juvenile member of his species. The Corvin student's voice grew stronger. This behavior pattern means that every human settlement contains potential defenders who will sacrifice themselves for juvenile protection. Any species that threatens human children does not face just parents or military forces, but every adult human within response distance. This creates a defensive capability that exceeds any military organization in known space. As each alien species presented their findings, similar patterns emerged. The crystal-skinned Valdori discovered that human creativity and innovation flourished in cultures that prioritized child welfare. The shadow beings from Necros found that human emotional resilience was directly connected to their childhood protection instincts. Every species had reached the same impossible conclusion. Humans were successful not despite their child protection behaviors, but because of them. Dr. Morgan listened to presentation after presentation with growing amazement. These alien species, each representing thousands of years of galactic civilization, were all reaching the same revolutionary understanding of human nature. When all the presentations were complete, the room fell silent for several minutes. Finally, Velox spoke for the group. We came to Earth believing we would observe primitive or illogical behaviors in a young species, he said. Instead, we have documented the most advanced survival strategy in known galactic history. Humans have discovered that protecting all juveniles, not just genetically related ones, creates exponential advantages in adaptability, innovation, cooperation, and defensive capability. Quill's skin shifted to deep blue patterns of respect. The human model suggests that our own species may have optimized for short-term survival at the expense of long-term advancement. We must reconsider fundamental aspects of our civilization structure. Thresh nodded solemnly. Corvin military doctrine will require complete revision. We have been measuring strength incorrectly for millennia. Dr. Harrison smiled as he listened to their conclusions. What you've discovered is something we call love. It's not just an emotion, it's a survival strategy. When adults love and protect all children, not just their own, it creates a society where every child can reach their full potential. The final day of the program was emotional in ways none of the aliens had expected. Children from the local community came to see their new alien friends before departure. Tommy Williams gave Velox a drawing of both of them together. Emma brought flowers for Quill, fascinated by how his skin changed colors when he was happy. Even the older children had grown attached to Thresh, who had learned to play gentler games during his stay. As the alien students prepared to board their transport ship, each carried more than just data and recordings. They carried a fundamental shift in understanding that would reshape their civilizations. The ship's doors opened with the same soft hiss as when they had first arrived, but everything was different now. These were not the same beings who had landed weeks earlier, confident in their superior understanding of survival and civilization. As the transport lifted off, Velox sent a final message to Dr. Harrison and Dr. Morgan through the Universal Communication System. The message was brief, but would be remembered by both humans for the rest of their lives. We came to study human weakness. Instead, we discovered your greatest strength. Thank you for showing us what it truly means to be an advanced civilization. Months later, Dr. Harrison received reports from across the galaxy. The Zenthari had begun implementing child protection programs that prioritized all juveniles, not just those from the most logical genetic lines. The Nexari Collective had started encouraging individual choice in juvenile care, creating voluntary guardian programs. Even the Corvan had established community protection systems for young ones. But perhaps most remarkably, several species had requested follow-up exchange programs. They wanted to learn more about how humans had developed this advanced survival strategy. They wanted to understand how protecting the weak had made humanity strong. Dr. Morgan smiled as she read the latest request from the Galactic Education Consortium. "It looks like we're going to be busy," she said to Dr. Harrison. He nodded, looking out the window at the playground where human children played under the watchful eyes of adults who would risk everything to keep them safe. Good. The galaxy has a lot to learn about what it really means to be strong. The exchange program had ended, but its impact was just beginning. Across 12 different worlds, alien civilizations were discovering that the secret to human success was not advanced technology or superior intelligence. It was something much simpler and infinitely more powerful: the willingness of adults to protect all children as if they were their own. In the end, the greatest lesson the aliens learned was that true strength comes not from abandoning the weak, but from ensuring that no one is weak because no one is abandoned.